Except I know exactly how to follow that. That's with Mr. Ian Mackay, who will probably have something interesting to say, I hope.
Well, I've been sitting over there thinking, how on earth do I follow that? Actually, I think that was a great christening for Mrs. Mack, don't you? I think that was really wonderful.
Best christening for the piano.
I can just see the headline in the Mary Valley Voice. Korean pianist, that's with a T, plays up with Mrs. Mack. I mean, it's beautiful, really. Beautiful. And I don't know how you, I mean, I have trouble with poetry knowing just which poems to do, so I always like to think of something that there's been a link in the last day or two or something, so that's the case with tonight. And to go from that monstrous instrument, a monstrously large instrument, I thought it seemed appropriate to scale back down to a very, very small instrument, and in the hope that you're able to hear it from over the back, because it doesn't have all that stuff there, but we'll just try. Tell me if you can hear this from over the back. Vaguely. Let me tell you about this instrument. This is a Juice Harp. There's various variants of it in lots of different nationalities, but this was the sort that was not unlike, anyway, the ones that were very popular among sailors. And it always strikes me as an irony that English sailors, when they came out with Cook's fleet to the mid-Pacific first and then on to Australia, brought with them an instrument that sounded amazingly like the instrument that was much, much, much larger, being the didgeridoo, that it was making much of the sound in this land. There's a bit of a story to this one though. I don't know if you're familiar. Depends how you learnt your school history. A lot of people think Captain Cook set out from England to discover Australia. That's what we were taught anyway. I mean, it wasn't lost in the first place. The people who lived there quite happily knew where it was, and that was great. He actually was sent out from England to view the transit of Venus, and he headed off to the South Pacific to do exactly that. And he got there with a good amount of time because you didn't know how long it was going to take you to sail from one side of the world to the other, so you couldn't just sort of like book your flight and, you know, look at the estimated time of arrival and know you'd be there. So he got there with a fair amount of time, because, you know, allowing for bad weather and all that. And it turned out that while Cook and his astronomer were building their observatory, the sailors noticed that the young ladies of these islands were A, extraordinarily beautiful, but B, prepared to exchange their sexual favours for an object metallic. Now, I believe the men didn't race off and trade in their Juice Harps, but what they did do was pull out the nails from the ship. And the first ones they pulled out were the nails that held their hammocks up, which probably gave them hard nights, but they probably didn't really notice that because they were engaged in other pursuits. But then they started pulling nails out of other bits and pieces of the ship. So finally, when the transit of Venus occurred, and Cook was very, very quick to get them all back in the boat and headed back to England because he didn't know how many nails these randy buggers had left there. And the sailors, as you can imagine, were fairly reluctant to leave because they had discovered a very, very early form of barter, trading a nail for a screw. You'd be a nut to bolt, wouldn't you? But they did. And they came back and they found Australia. And if you remember, they got stuck on the Barrier Reef. And I'm sure that the thing uppermost in Cook's mind as they threw cannons and so on overboard was, I hope those buggers have left enough nails to hold this boat together. But it did, and they finally got back to it and all of that. So I just thought I might do a little something on this first. I did hear on the ABC, so it must be true, that the ukulele is described as the instrument, the ideal instrument for a person whose desire to perform far exceeds their willingness to practice. And I think that probably applies very much to the Juice Harp too. It's the sort of thing you sit down in the back corner and just play around. Anyway. There you go, enough of that, I'm really a poet, so I just like to do that occasionally. And it seemed appropriate to follow a big instrument with a piddly little one, so that's good. They do get even smaller than that. I think there's a little tiny one there that's that big, but I don't know if you would have heard that over the back. But anyway, poems, oh yeah. I had a different poem in my mind to do, sparked from something that occurred today, but when I heard Sandy's song earlier on about floods and things, I thought, it changed my mind totally, so I hope that's all right. I got home late last Friday and the traffic, no, that's the wrong stuff. I don't know where it's all heading, but I'll tell you, it's really no joke that the frogs in our dam are now swearing. Why on earth can't they just croak? Now you'll say that my mind is all twisted, and I suppose that you'll probably just scoff, but when I got home last Friday, or the Friday before actually, this frog chimed in with, "Fuck off." Oh, I was quite flabbergasted. I mean, what if the neighbours heard? They'd probably think that I taught him. And I scarce even know the word. Well, all that night the rain came down. Of such weather I'm normally quite fond, but I didn't like those words I heard emanating from the pond. Because no longer was there one, you see. They'd all join in chorus. All those little buggers going, "Fuck off, fuck off, fuck off." Oh, hell, it was undecorous. So I grabbed a torch and I tiptoed down underneath my umbrella. I wouldn't shout or do me block. I'm not that kind of fella, but I thought that I should have a word. Things were getting out of hand. I thought if I told them how I felt, they'd be sure to understand. So I said, "What? Mind your language." I've lost the line then. "Would you mind your language, please?" Now I'm sure that I was quite reasonable, and I'm sure that they all heard, but they just kept on swearing, using that flaming F word. Well, my mission had been a failure. My task, quite plainly, I'd mucked. And as I slowly walk back home, you can hear it coming, can't you? This big frog bird, "Get back, get back, get back." I should explain for young ears, poets have a bit of a licence on the four-letter F word. It was first used in public, I believe, if you believe Bill Bryson, and I do, by a Scottish poet called William Dunbar in 1507. And he used the F word. It replaced another word, and you've got to admit that it's a very, very versatile word, and I think Australians have explored the limits of its versatility as noun, verb, adjective, and...
We have the C word as thy quaint honour turned to dust in Andrew Marvell.
Oh, well, thank you for a little bit. I haven't got any poems about the C word. And there is a poem to warn you about the three-letter F word, but we'll keep that for another evening. Now, the other poem, yeah, there is a little bit of a link to this as well, actually. A couple of years ago, I was rung by a friend, and she said, "There's this lady rang up today, and they're trying to track you down for something you've written." And I thought, "Oh shit, what's wrong?" And she said, "No, they want to give you $1,000. And anyway, so I did a bit of inquiring, and it was the copyright agency. And despite very definite guidance from my partner, who said, "Don't trust them. They just want your bank details, and it's all bad." But they had this website that seemed legit. And anyway, so I did all the right things, and indeed I got some money, which is really good. And a couple of years ago, they made contact again, and there was some money. And you look up and you see what it's for, because you have to sign that it's your stuff, you know. And it was, I can be dead, it was this poem I wrote. And then just the other day, just before I cleared it off the emails, it said, member claim or something, and I thought, "Oh, this is another one of those things, you know, that someone's offering you $4 million from," you know, and I nearly wiped it off, and I thought, "I better have a look," and bugging me there, it was the copyright agency. And so for this same poem, that it had been picked up somewhere in Victoria for schools anyway, and so there was $600. So now, it's 20 years ago this month that I wrote it, and so that's an annual return of $50, which I reckon is pretty good. It's the only poem that's ever earned me anything. So I thought I might like to share it with you. Oh, and the other thing that made it even more interesting, I had my first ever visit to Woolworths ever since they built the supermarket up in Maloney, and I wasn't shopping there, I was with my old father in Rocky yesterday, and I was telling him this story as we stood waiting in the checkout. And one of the kids who features in this poem is Jason. And bugging me dead, I looked at the guy who was operating the checkout, and there his name was Jason. So I thought, I've got to do this poem tonight. Oh, and there are a few versions of this, so forgive me. It was written in Nambour, as I said, 20 years ago. I was on my way to a poet's night in July 1993, I still remember it. And there were all these trolleys lined up in the street, and sort of this poem came into my head. But then you go to the poet's night, and driving home, I'd lost it all. And about a month later, I think there was a good poem there, so I sat down and sort of wrote it, and anyway, it's been, well, $50 a year. You can't stare at that, can you? So, okay, gimpy version. Oh, sorry, no, I should tell you one other thing. It's an important name, Sylvan Goldman. Now, obviously a name on everybody's lips. Sylvan Goldman was a shopkeeper in the United Mistakes. He noticed that people purchased shopping to the extent of the wicker basket on their arm, and if they could only have a bigger thing to put their shopping in, they would obviously spend more. So he employed people pushing around laundry trolleys, putting in groceries, and they paid for them at his desk, and then they went round the back, and the idea of the shopping trolley caught on. And you'd agree that if the shopping trolley was removed from supermarkets today, I think the whole empire would probably crumble. Don't you reckon that'd be right? There was movement in the car park, for the word had passed around that the trolley from the Goldfields Plaza got away. And it joined the wild street trolleys. It was nowhere to be found. And all the trolley boys had gathered to the fray. There was Jason, you see, there was, who had made his start in the deli but had been demoted. And there was Brad, who lived on chips and coke and was rather fat and bloated. And there was Glennie, who could push his trolleys in the longest line of all, and a new young chap called Kevin, who stood over 6 feet tall. Well, they scoured the streets of Gympie. They found 2 trolleys near Kidd Bridge, 15 wedged in gutters and 1 in Liquor World, in the fridge. But then someone brought the dreadful news that had the trolley boys all frown. Those street trolleys were seen heading fast through the 5 ways into the town. "Oh, rat," said Brad, "we've lost them. We may as well just give up the ghost." When trolleys head that fast down Mary Street, they're headed for the coast. But Kevin refused to chuck it in. Well, it was his very first day. He threw his cap down on the ground and he ran off for the fray. And the trolley boys, they watched him. They stood there still and mute. Then Brad saw him reach up the top of Mellor Street and yelled, "Go for it, Kevin, you little beaut!" Now, it must be said that in Gympie, a trolley's life's not gay, so the dream, that's the old meaning of gay, so the dream of every trolley is to escape to Tin Can Bay. Well, Kevin chased the trolleys downhill. He was running fast and worrying. And at last he caught those trolleys, just, what's going to rhyme with worrying, just before they reached Gumburian. And he cut them off and he wheeled them round and he said, "Now you lot, cut this crap." Oh, sorry, I have to say that because it rhymes. And he lined them up inside each other and he took out his octopus strap. And the streets of Gympie all went quiet as he wheeled those trolleys home. Their spirits were broken. He'd done that much. Now never more would they roam. Today, Kevin's name's a household word. It's enshrined in trolley boy law. But he no longer walks the streets because he manages the store. Steve did point out that the original version that was in Nambour, and of course when you do that, Kevin was the Prime Minister. The Mulaney version, you speak of the Mulaney version, Mulaney were the mob that battled to have a Woolworths, no, that's true, battled to not have a Woolworths there and they finally got one. The Mulaney version is there was movement in the car park for the word had passed around, the trolley from Mulaney Woolies had got away. No one gave it. Thank you.